What you are about to hear next is a tool of empowerment from our moderator, Mrs. Toyin, who is the organizer, founder, brainchild, visionary, and purpose-driven leader of the Trade with Africa Business Summit. And she's going to introduce our distinguished guest. I'm going to hand this over to her, and she can take it away.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Good morning. Good morning. Ooh, you've not had your coffee today. No. Let's try again. Good morning. Good morning. Fantastic. Thank you again for being here. I know we do not take it for granted that you've made our time to be here. I also want to acknowledge the presence of the Consul General of Nigeria, New York. Is the highest ranking officer at the office in New York. Your presence here, we thank you, sir, and his team members. Please help me too. Before we go in, one thing that also, maybe we'll do this now. Yesterday when he came, he actually handed me a letter from the Office of the Vice President. I was like, no, I'm not taking that letter. You read it or you message it out to the room. Maybe let's do that before we just go on, sir. Could we get a mic for the Consul General? I know I'm just like, okay, awesome. Please, sir. I cannot ignore your presence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The organizers actually invited the Vice President to be part of this process. And they indicated interest to attend this event, but for other conflicting programs. So he has written a letter personally to me to convey that apology to the organizers and the participants in this event. And this is a summit. He would have loved to be personally participate and drive home the point that African investment is very key and important to us at this point in time. So that is a letter that I have. The Vice President personally will have been here. So thank you very much once again for making it happen. And this is a very important event for the African countries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, something also unique that we're doing is with this panel. Typically, when you have a panel, it's kind of like similar topics, and we walk through it. What we decided to do is to invite here experts in separate fields, because we want to also look at the continents and say, what are the emerging things that business leaders need to start considering that typically you may not really think about or consider around Africa. So I'll let my panelists, I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves and the sector they're representing and what they do in country, on ground. Thank you.
Hello, Toyin, thank you for the invite. Thank you for putting this together. My name is Komi. I've been working in global banking for 20 plus years, but now I'm based in Ghana. I'm a risk professional. I'm the Chief Risk Officer of Emerging Market Investment Group, and our company basically help business leaders and organizations to do business in Africa with peace of mind. So that's all I can say for now. For peace of mind, because a lot of people think of Africa as a risky or the riskiest place to do business. I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. Africa is no more riskier than China, for instance, to do business. And I have facts to prove it. So we Africans suffer from what is called a reputational risk. We have a very bad reputation, or we do not manage our reputation properly. But before I give the mic to my colleague here, I have a piece of advice for everybody. If you want to do business, no matter in what country or what continent, investigate before you invest. I repeat, investigate before you invest. No matter who you do business with, You need to investigate before you invest. That's what my company is here for. Anywhere you want to do business in Africa, we're Africa focused now. Anywhere you want to do business in Africa, we can help you with the due diligence. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Dr. Niyi?
Okay. Good morning. My name is Dr. Niyi Osamiluyi, background medical doctor, but I focus more on leveraging technology right now to increase access to quality care. That's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. Part of our work, we built a network of doctors, online physician network. It's the largest in Africa, doctors across Africa. It's called DocuLink. And it's interesting that since we built the online platform, a lot of doctors now approach us to support them in their offline activities, events and things like that. So part of the things I'm really passionate about is leveraging this our network to support healthcare in Africa, and also to see how we can connect people that want to invest in Africa in healthcare, connect them to Africa, and also Nigerians in diaspora that are looking to connect and support doctors back home to see how we can help and facilitate that interaction. Thank you.
Okay, yes, you're next.
I'm so inspired by your field. Thank you, Toyin, for inviting me to be part of this panel. My name is Omoike, Obawaeki. I'm from Nigeria, but I'm based in the US now. I work with PwC. We help US companies that want to do business in Africa. Those who already have businesses, those who want to get into Africa. We help them with financial due diligence, tax advisory, tax structuring, economic landscape, doing business in Africa kind of study, not your type of security check, but that's interesting to know that you are out there doing that because, like you said, a lot of companies, especially in the US, they are afraid to go into Africa because of the reputation that Africa has. And as much as possible, we try to educate them that a Google search is not enough. Wow. And talk to us, talk to my co-facilitator here, go to Africa. You cannot just go look at the map of Africa and you know where Nigeria is and you say, oh, it's really risky. But you've never really visited, the country. So, yeah, so that's what I do. I've been doing that for over 15 years, half of that time from Nigeria, half of the other time now in the US. So I'm excited to be here and I hope to contribute.
Wow, thank you so much. Within a large structured organization or a company, I believe each of this topic would be an umbrella within that company. So that's one of the things we need to consider. When you think about healthcare, cost of healthcare, right? If you're trying to employ labor, you have to now start thinking about what's the cost of healthcare. So the next question I will ask is, and I will ask broad question, then we'll do a little bit of deep dive, is within your sectors, what are the opportunities and what are the challenges that you've seen within each of that space?
Okay, within the corporate due diligence and risk management sector, the opportunities are boundless. Because, like I said, people have the wrong conception or assumption about Africa. But if they can just go over that, we have been educated here about the boundless opportunities that Africa has to offer. The challenge, though, is we African, we do not tell a good story at all. We do not even tell our own story. We let other people tell the story about us. I was in Nigeria in February. Before I went to Nigeria, people told me, why are you going to Nigeria? They're going to have an election. There is a civil war there. I said, civil war where? You see, I'm an African, but people try to discourage me. When I was working in corporate banking, and for one of the biggest bank, I'm not going to give you the name here, but you can look me up. I had a meeting in Accra, Ghana, where my office is based. But my office told me I cannot go. I said, why not? They said, because there's Ebola in Ghana. I said, there's no Ebola in Ghana. They say, if you go, we will quarantine you. I said, so I didn't go.
Wow.
So that's the type of problem we Africans we have.
Wow.
Now, other than that, Africa has some unique risks, and I'll talk about them later. But Africa is no more riskier than any other places to do business. We have our own particularities that we need to manage too. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So first of all, let me talk about an interesting thing that is happening in healthcare across Africa before I talk about the challenges and opportunities. First of all, it's a realization about the importance of healthcare, especially within the government. The importance of healthcare contributing to economic and human development. I think across Africa, there's a realization that good healthcare, quality healthcare, can contribute to economic development and to achieving the sustainable development goals. I think that's the first thing. So realizing this, governments now realize it is important to invest in healthcare. However, there's a small challenge. Governments realize, they found that they don't have enough of this capital or enough of these resources. For example, 2001, there was the Abuja declaration that African governments should invest 15% of their budget in healthcare. The last couple of years, Nigeria, 3 to 5% has been invested in healthcare. So the interesting thing is that governments realize, first of all, they don't have enough resources, and donor funding it's been realized that donor funding is unpredictable and is dwindling. So the interesting thing is that private sector involvement. Government now realizes that private sector is important to leverage the capacity, the capability, and the capital of the private sector to move healthcare forward. Talking about challenges of healthcare in Africa. So Africa is home to 25% of the disease burden of the world. Unfortunately, 3% of in terms of healthcare professionals stay or work in Africa. So you have 25% disease burden and you have 3% healthcare resources. And in terms of finance, only 1% of healthcare spending occurs in Africa. So when you look at this in terms of disease burden, in terms of finance, in terms of human capital, these are key challenges that we're hoping the private sector will be able to support and will be able to bridge. In fact, the financing gap in a report was released by UNECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, in February this year that put the financing gap in Africa at $66 billion. So we're hoping private sector players there, and I'll talk later about this, some of these gaps in terms of actual things that money can go into in Africa. All right, thank you.
All right, I'll take it from there. I'll speak to the gap and the opportunities and challenges maybe later on, but the opportunities from tax policy and regulation in Africa as a whole is number one, the ease of doing business. A lot of African countries or governments are very serious about improving on the ease of doing business in Africa. We've seen a lot of policies actually being implemented. For example, you have a lot of one-stop shops right now across Africa where a new company can go to an organization, you are registered, you register a business, you register for taxation, everything can be done within 24 hours. You can open a bank account. So that is part of the way they've engaged to improve how to do business in Africa. Another opportunity in Africa as well is governments are now engaging more, particularly the tax authorities. They are now engaged in terms of tax education. When you approach them and say, hey, I want to do a business, how will I be taxed? Before, it wasn't like that before. Now you can engage with them on a no-name basis. If you don't even want to disclose who you are, they are ready to talk to you and say, we think this is how it will go. So that will help you go back to your drawing board and plan accordingly if you want to do some structuring and stuff like that. So we've seen that happen. And we've also seen tax amnesty programs executed or implemented by governments where they try to encourage voluntary disclosures, where they try to encourage voluntary compliance So they tell you, if you come to us with clean hands and disclose where you have been at fault or where you have not been up to date within a time frame, we are going to forgive all the penalties and interest that we should have levied on you based on the law, provided you pay up within such and such a time. So we have that going on. You can negotiate and say, I agree, I owe you, but give me some time to pay. So that is also happening. One other thing, that's both an opportunity and a challenge together. It's we are still trying to deal with foreign exchange regulations. So the opportunity is there, is that a lot of African countries have relaxed the foreign exchange regulation. For example, South Africa, many years ago, South Africa used to be, a lot of companies do not want to go to South Africa because they are afraid that once their money gets in, they cannot bring it out. Yeah, so that is no longer the case. Nigeria was next, but that is no longer the case. The rules are pretty relaxed. I think the challenge really now is whether the foreign currency is available for you to get. So I think we might talk about that later on if we have the time.
Yes,
thank you.
I actually want to own on what you were talking about. And to, as far as you're comfortable, could you give, looking at the continent and geographically, what are the good players when you say regional? You talked about South Africa, Nigeria. Within your sector, who would you say is most mature and which ones are kind of lagging behind that you think we could move up the chain, that have a lot to learn from the leaders in that space?
Yeah, honestly, yeah, but without any bias, in terms of regulation, tax legislations, administration, the top ranking in Africa is South Africa, Mauritius, maybe Morocco. Nigeria might be around 4th, 5th place, really. So I don't want to mention others. There are really places that are very terrible in terms of difficulty. First of all, with the law itself. It's either too old or there are a lot of gaps. We don't understand it. And when you approach the tax authorities for you to understand the law, they penalize you. There are some areas like that. Yeah. Okay. So, but generally, yeah.
Yes. So the reason, one of the things we try to do on this platform is we go after the elephant in the room. What I mean is there are conversations that happen in the political space that is highly diplomatic, but from a business standpoint, if you want to know what your risks are, right? So full transparency is so important. So that was why I asked that question. So if you do want to know more, the experts are here. Please engage. There might be things they might be able to share with you one-on-one that we may not cover here. But for me, I want us as business people to think about these are things you have to think about. You cannot play the ostrich in the sand, like, put my head down. This isn't happening. We cannot no longer do that. So that's why we are elevating this type of conversations, and we are saying business leaders need this type of knowledge. So please leverage them while they are here. Talk to them one-on-one and get their business cards. You may not need it today. It might be 2 years, it might be 3 years down the line. So thank you for that. You want to go next? Then okay, please.
Let me chime in on that same question.
Okay.
Because one other thing that is important of doing business in Africa, let's put aside the World Bank's doing business, ease of doing business classification, is access to information. Most African countries don't make information available easily. Even though the regulation will give you the right to that information, some officials just decide not to make it available. So you have to really know what your right is and what the local regulations authorize. Otherwise, if you go, for instance, to a tax authority, you're doing a corporate due diligence on a partner for a big contract, and the partner even signed a disclaimer for you to pull their tax record. Somebody in the office can just say, I'm not going to give it to you. So these are things that we need to be aware of. in every country.
Yes, and I want to, on that, as we're not wrapping up now, but when we do wrap up, I want you to give recommendations.
Okay.
Because one of the things is we can highlight where the challenges are,
Yes.
but I also want us as experts, because we do have key people. If you pick a country like Nigeria,
Yes.
the message, whatever we're talking about now, part of what they are going to do is they're going to issue a report that they will circulate back to the government, but not just the government, to their colleagues around the world would have access to that feedback. So, right? That's their commitment to us. So as experts as well, please, let's feel free. And if we don't feel comfortable sharing it on this platform again, go one-on-one, get their business cards. They can invite you to New York. And we need, for me, all of these challenges, who is going to solve it?
Yeah.
Right? We're leaving all of the things on the table. For who? Right? So the Africa we desire to see is all in our hands.
Yes.
So each of us have to take a piece of it, run with it, and lead. There's so much work to be done. So that's my challenge to everybody. Okay, thank you. Dr. Ni.
Yeah, so I want to further highlight on the opportunities. So pretty much, if anybody listens to this and maybe has a couple of million access, not directly, maybe access to a couple of $1 million, I want you to just think, I need to put this into healthcare in Africa. That's what I want to hopefully achieve, to see how we can mobilize capital to healthcare in Africa. So in terms of opportunities, doing a little bit of deeper dive, it's estimated that 2030, the opportunity will be up to $259 billion in terms of the opportunity in healthcare, potentially creating 16 million jobs. And again, when you look at percentages, about 14% of the healthcare opportunity across the world will be in Africa. So there's so much to be done in Africa in terms of healthcare. And when we talk about the areas that these investments can go to, medical equipment, medical laboratory, pharmaceutical, a lot of pharmaceutical, the drugs in Africa, they come from India, they come from China. So there's so much opportunity in setting up these manufacturing plants in Africa. And in fact, we all know about the population growth in Africa by 2050. So the market is there. So all I can say, encourage everyone here with access to capital. Africa is ready for business, especially, and the governments now see the very important role of the private sector. In Nigeria, when I was growing up, and anybody that grew up in Nigeria would realize previously it was free healthcare for everybody, free healthcare for... But the government now realizes there's nothing like free healthcare. Somebody has to pay for healthcare. So there are different kinds of reforms in healthcare right now. We've had the National Health Insurance Scheme for some time. Now we're having the state-based health insurance scheme, and this requires private sector support in terms of capital, in terms of the health insurance company. So the opportunity is huge right now for private sector participation in healthcare. Thank you.
Can I just talk?
Yes, please.
Just two opportunities
Yes.
across Africa. One of them is, the ambassador talked about it yesterday, but high level. He mentioned the government, let me read it exactly. He said investment protection policies. Now, let me just talk about two ways that is going on. First of all is through local content. So now popularly, local content is very popular when you're talking about oil and gas and all that. But we have moved from there. So local content now is looking at skill development, knowledge acquisition. Apart from the requirement that a business has to be partly owned by a local person, that is, I think, in my mind, we'll come to you to do some due diligence and find a competent local partner who shares the same vision and idea with you. Probably a 10% share, 5%, 10% share will suffice. It's only in the oil and gas and mining sector you have maybe like 49%, 50%. But for other sectors, there is really no strict rule. So getting a local partner is one, but more importantly is knowledge development, skill acquisition. We encourage that you employ local people yes, you might bring your people to be top management, but that knowledge over time, there is a regulation that knowledge over time, we should see it transferred. In 5 years, we don't expect you brought maybe a technical director, whatever name you want to give it, to do business in Nigeria, South Africa, wherever in Africa. And after 5 years or after 10 years, you still have an expatriate occupying that position. So the governments are no longer finding that funny or exciting. They are saying, hey, you have spent 10 years in our country. If you still need an expatriate to occupy this position after 10 years, then something is wrong with your organization. You are not teaching people. You are not transferring skill. Then you say Africa is still underdeveloped. But you have been doing business in Africa for 30 years. And still, we have an expatriate who is still commercial manager, who is still procurement manager. So we haven't talking about middle-class management. How about we move higher? So there are opportunities there. Then the other part I want to talk about opportunities is you'll be amazed. The United States of America has just 2 or 3 double tax treaties with Africa. 2 or 3, max 3. Liberia, South Africa, maybe one other. Now, they have a lot of bilateral trade agreements, bilateral agreements. Now, 2 things with those agreements. Number 1, they are aid-based. They are aid-based. We are not talking about aid. We want to do business with Africa. So that we are saying do business with Africa. Don't give us aids anymore. So number 1, they are aid-based. Then secondly, they are very old. They are very old. In the 50s, some of them are even older than 50s. Even before I was born, there are many very old. So the problem with that, now, those bilateral agreements are no longer being honored by a lot of the governments in Africa. Okay? Because, again, they are aid-based and they are old. So they are saying, if you want to do business with Africa, under this bilateral agreement, we have to revise it. And we don't see the U.S. excited about that. So that's an opportunity. Negotiate and sign double tax treaties with Africa. Forget about the bilateral agreements. We don't want them anymore. Let's do double taxation treaty. You come do business here, you want to take your money back, we'll reduce the taxation rate. We do it. So that's an opportunity we should think about when thinking about doing business with Africa.
Toyin, I just want to quickly chip in something before going back to you. And I want to ask Nigerians that are here, or maybe West Africans that are where if they know where the largest cancer center in West Africa, where it's located, if they have an idea where it's located, the largest cancer radiotherapy center in West Africa. Does anyone know? I don't know. Aha. So the largest cancer center was recently commissioned in Lagos, Nigeria, in Lutz. Lutz is a government hospital. It's owned by the federal government, Lagos University Teaching Hospital. But the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, led by Mr. Uche Oji, they invested $11 million in constructing a cancer center. It's the largest in Africa. So Lutz presents the market, and they built the facility. And so Mr. Uche Oji, who heads NSIA, he said when he was speaking with the president of Nigeria and the chief of staff, they asked him, this facility that you're going to build is going to be too expensive. The poor are not going to be able to afford it. He said, that's not his problem. You guys fix that. Fix that by fixing the reforms, health insurance and things like that. There are people that are going to Ghana, that are going to Cote d'Ivoire to access this care. So let's make it available. So I'm just giving that as an example of PPPs that are going on in Nigeria. In Abuja, a quaternary hospital is being currently envisaged for Abuja. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Please, this is conversational, so
Yes.
please, yes.
Okay, I'm going to add something to what he said, and then
Omoike.
and then give a conclusion. Actually, a recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay. So there is something going on in the world now that they call health tourism. Anybody heard of it? Yeah. Why can't we Africans take advantage of it? The continent is beautiful. Every country you go to Africa, look, I have representatives in 34 countries in Africa. I travel the continent. The place is beautiful. Why can't we take advantage of it? Mauritius do, Tunisia does, and that's it. When our leaders get sick, they take a private jet, they go to London, they come to the US. Why can't we have a state of the art like my brother, like doctor is saying? We're building in Nigeria, and if anybody needs chemotherapy in West Africa, they go to Nigeria. Look, when I was working for HSBC, I was stationed at some point in India. Most of the British patients go to India for their treatment. The Indians have been doing health tourism for years. And we Africans also, we can do it. That's all I'm not a medical doctor, so that's all I wanted to add. I'm a business person.
I'm happy I've won a convert here already.
So we can do it. Congratulations in Nigeria. Now, local content is actually a solution for one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest business risks in Africa. Let me start.
Yes.
Africa has, we know it, a lot of challenges with infrastructure. Our roads are bad, power supply is unreliable. So one of the advice that we give to our clients is like, if you worry so much about infrastructure, before you go to Africa, you need to identify a very good, reliable partner in the country, local. Where your drivers or your supply chain cannot deliver, the local partner knows the routes and they can deliver to you. So that's one of the advice I'm going to give to everybody. Before you start worrying too much about the infrastructure, the road condition, you want to ship something from Abidjan to Lagos or from Lagos to Accra, just have a local logistics person, a local partner in some areas that you can outsource to, and you will see how successful you'll be. Thank you.
Can I add to you quickly?
Please.
Yes, let me do that because education is very key.
Yes.
Yeah? Enough of the Google search. Education is very key. Do you know in Nigeria, let me use Nigeria as an example, Ghana has it, South Africa has it, almost all the countries in, I'm sure, I won't be surprised if 54 countries in Africa, they all have these provisions in their law, okay? In Nigeria, there is a provision in our tax law that if you do business in a place where there is no electricity, there is no water, there is no road infrastructure, you have incentives.
Yes.
If you want to go there and you build the road yourself, government says, we will, all the money you spent, take it as a deduction from your tax, deduct it from your profits, reclaim it back 100%, no questions asked.
Yes.
There are laws like that. And nobody has ever used it. It's in our book. Every day I sit and we flip past. Nobody's true. No roads, no water. It's there. It's there. It's in our law. They have not revised it. Okay, we've even had other situations where government said, okay, come, let's build the road together. PPP. And we will give you, PPP. We will give you, again, a credit. They are not saying, okay, we'll give you credits. You can deduct your cost from your tax that you're supposed to pay to us. Do you see? So the money you invested in for us to build this road or whatever kind of infrastructure, well, that was specifically road. Then they said you will get a tax deduction for it. So, but you cannot, that's why I said, the Google searches are enough. You cannot just look at Nigeria from Google and say, the roads are too bad, corruption rate is this. Those times, no, honestly, those times have changed.
Wow.
You know, some other thing I tell my clients, I work with the big clients in the US. So sometimes when I have the opportunity, what I tell them is, the company where I work, PwC, is primarily owned by the US. The parent company is here. We are all over Africa. So I tell them, for example, I said, if PwC, a US company, regulated from the US, can survive in Africa, any company can survive in Africa.
Thank you. A clap for that.
Yes.
So it's the same thing. We don't have FATCA rules, for example, in Nigeria. We don't. We don't have it in Africa. We don't have anti-corruption rules. Well, they may be, but they are not working like that in Africa. So the US, for example, tells us you must not take bribe. You must not do this. You must not do that for us to comply with US rules. They tell PwC Nigeria, for example, they send us these rules. And they also send us periodic auditors to come and check and make sure we are complying. Yeah. And we are complying. And the places where we do business in Nigeria, they know us because we've done it over time. It's not our reputation. Or when we, for example, if we go to the tax authorities, they say, okay, PwC, they have come. These people, they only speak English and they wear suits. That is now how they brand us, that we only speak English. So if they don't want to speak English, they don't talk to us. So, no, yeah, because the English we speak is by the books. We go to the tax office with the tax law under our armpit. And when the tax man says, play ball, we now say, okay, what section of the law? No, but it's true. But it's true. And we are now known for that. So even if you'll be amazed, even businesses that want to play ball, they don't come to us. Yes. They'll go and play the ball with the tax authorities themselves. So that is what I'm saying. If it can work in Africa for PwC, it can work with any other kind of business. Just tell your local partner, these are my rules. If you want to be my partner, play by my rules. Whether it's FATCA, whether it's anti-corruption, whatever it is, you will find. So I was discussing with Mr. Dale yesterday. You know, he won the award, yes. You know, one thing he told me, he said from their research, before he started his company, he started doing some research, he said he found out that Nigeria has the highest, in fact, till today, Nigeria has the highest number of people that have Western education. As in the second place is not close. So if, for example, Nigeria is at 50, let's say 50 million, the second place is like maybe 10 million. They are not even close. So what am I telling you? Nigeria has the resources, people who have gone to the law schools in London, doctors from anywhere in the world. And a lot of them are back home. And if you think they are not back home, you will find them in America. You will find them anywhere. And they are ready to go home to help my brother sitting next to me. They are ready. It's just for us to be open and honest and have these conversations. Wow. Africa is see, risk in Africa is high. I'm not going to dispute it. Rewards in Africa is highest. It's not even higher. No, but it's true.
Can somebody be tweeting those things? I'm guessing a lot here.
It's true. If you put money in an American bank, tell me, what's the highest interest rate you will get? If you get 5%, you are going to be dancing. Yes. Yeah? Put your money in Nigeria. Yes, the risk is high. I'm not preaching Nigeria. Put your money anywhere in Africa. The risk is high, I agree. But you will not get less than 50% of your returns. Wow. I'm not talking about in 5 years. In 3 years, you will not get less than 50% of your returns. If you think I'm joking, let's try it. No, but it's true. Let's try it. Let's put our money down and let's see what it will give to you. One last thing to you. MTN. No, listen to this. Before MTN came into Nigeria, MTN South Africa was the biggest in their group, right? MTN South Africa had existed many years, maybe more than 10 years before they came to Nigeria. In 2-3 years, the Nigerian business became the biggest business in MTN group. I'm sure if you Google, you will hear, the Nigeria regulator fined MTN one huge amount of money. Let me tell you the truth. These are the facts are not hidden. That was a clear. You see, let me tell you what happened. The regulators came up and said, MTN, we want not just MTN, all telecommunication players in Nigeria, we want you to register your users. We want to know, because of the kidnappings and all that, we want to know who has what number. And they gave them a time frame for that registration to be completed. But my dear friends at MTN thought that it was business as usual. In Nigeria, we give a law, they will not implement. Even I felt that way. I felt, when it's time, they will find a story and extend. But to the shock, listen, the president himself was shocked that his people implemented the law. When the time came, there was no amendment. They did not extend. They said, we gave you a time frame, you must comply. They did not comply, and they were fined.
That's how we have to do it.
See, things are changing. The so-called corruption, we saw it. MTN did not believe their eyes. They fined them and they stood with it. They went to court. They said, we are not moving. MTN had to negotiate and say, give us payment plan. We will pay. No, so those are just some of the things for you to realize that times are changing. He has gone back to Africa. I was telling Andrew yesterday, he said, I'm sure you're coming back to Nigeria. I said, of course I am. I'm not getting all these experiences in the US to now sit down in one room and cross my leg and be receiving AC. No, that's not the idea.
Wow.
I should be able to go back to Nigeria and maybe talk to Toyin and say, in case you need people, you have people who want advice, I'm here. That's the reason we are doing all of this. So we are educated, we are experienced, we are going back home to do these things. We want our country to work. We also want the money. Do you understand? Yes, we want our countries to work. We want to build the roads. We want to put telecommunications. We want to have hospitals. You understand? But again, it's also prosperity for our nation, prosperity for us and our partners in the US.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take advantage of the presence of key people here to use that to channel some information. So I've attended a couple of town halls where there are passionate pleas of diaspora offering themselves, offering their skills, offering their talent, offering their influence. One opportunity that we have is that we need African leaders to build an inclusive government that embraces all that we have to offer. Because sometimes there's a protectionist approach that you encounter when you engage with the people on ground. So that's something I don't have a solution for it, but I have made observations. So if you have recommendations around, let me give you what I mean by that. There's a story called the Chicago Boys. Have you ever heard about the Chicago Boys before? Awesome. Chile. So as I've gone about my own work, I actually work with a lot of advisors from around the world that feed me information in terms of, this is how we grew our country, this is what we did, we see what you're talking about Africa, learn from us. One of those days, a vice president that originated from Chile said, Toyin, let me tell you what happened to Chile, my country. In the late 70s, early 80s, it was a mess. But there was this conversation and agreement between US and Chile, and they sent a group of boys, men, to a university in Chicago to study under the most, highest economists at that time. And all of the laws, imparted into these boys. But the agreement was, you come back home. At that time, I believe they had a dictator, but what he did was all those boys that they called Chicago boys, he positioned them in key offices. They implemented those rules. Within a couple of years, they transformed that region. There's a movie about it. Just Google the Chicago Boys. That's the movie. And one of the things they've done is that Chile is one of the most highly productive countries in the world. Mm-hmm. Highly productive countries in the world. They outperform most countries. You will see their Chile bananas, you will see everything, and they're very quiet. But they are producing. Look at their population to their productivity. Right? Yeah. But the storyline is there was a government in power, there were issues in the government. Instead of covering it up and saying we will struggle with, they opened it up and said, give us the most brilliant professor. We want our people to go and study under the best economists in the world. And not just study and stay there. Come home. But then include them in government and transforming the land. Mm-hmm. So that's my message, is the fact that let's think of the greater good of, if all we are trying to do is move the continent forward, then the number one thing is our mind is where are the best experts around the world? Manufacturing, right? Healthcare. And let's start thinking of ways, I don't know the solution, but let's start thinking of ways how to include, look at your expertise, right? How do we tap into that knowledge base? So that's an open question for me that I'm just thinking about to say, how does our leaders leverage all the talent in this room to move the continent forward? So thank you.
Let me add something to it, because it is a truth, and we need to speak truth to power. And I know we're streaming this. The problem we have in Africa is the current leadership. First of all, you have to excuse me, I'm going to be blunt. The average age for the African leader is 62 years, and the average age for the entire population is 25 years. It's a big risk. I don't want to get into that yet. But our mentality has to change. The Chile did it, we should be able to do it. The typical African politician thinks in terms of politics, power, before they think about people. Look, if we had economic growth, if we have a robust middle class, and people are making money, and all the youth from the university, they are vibrant, nobody's going to be rioting, nobody's going to be looking to even challenge your power. Look, economics is more important than politics. But the issue that we, the diaspora, we have is, once you come back to Africa, they want to label you. First of all, each political party wants to pull you to their side. But my advice to anybody looking to go back, which is also the same advice I give to all my business partners, remain politically neutral. Political neutrality. If you want to be effective and efficient, you need to be politically neutral. Don't go into bed with any political party. The only party you have is the Nigerian party. The only party you have is the Ghanaian party. The only party you have for now is the African party. You don't belong to NPP, NDC, NPP, NDT, Republican. We don't need that. That's my point. And the politicians also have to be willing to accept us as experts, professionals, not politicians. Thank you.
Dr. Nee.
Yeah, so in terms of healthcare resources and the diaspora, healthcare professionals, we know there's so many Nigerians there in the US, doctors, nurses, in the UK, in Canada, and across the world. Considering the human capital back home, so we're trying to create a platform whereby Nigerians in the diaspora, healthcare, can contribute. So there's so many, it's critical in terms of capacity building. Part of what we do back home is that we work with, I talked about our offline engagement, we work with a lot of healthcare association, doctor association, radiologists, cardiologists, etc., in terms of their events. So we're looking for ways whereby Nigerians in diaspora can connect with those back home and support them in terms of capacity building and training. We think this is really important in terms of moving healthcare forward in Nigeria. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Let me just, I'm not sure we have a lot of time, but let me just take a few minutes to talk about what we call the challenges, but I rather call it the areas of development. Okay, there are challenges, I agree, but we can work on it in Africa. The first point I have here is we need to engage more, education, conversations. So from a policy perspective, from a tax perspective, our governments, through the tax authorities, they should engage more. They should educate the populace. I'll give you a simple example. In the US, if you earn income in the US, you want to know what your tax is, you can actually find it on Google. You don't need to have a tax specialist or a tax expert. You don't even have to go to the tax authorities. You can go to Google and say, you can find the US tax rates for individual and companies on Google. Detail, it will tell you, if you earn this much, this is what your tax should be. If you earn this much, this is what your tax should be. But you don't find that, in Africa. So we need to do that. We have to be transparent. If you want people to voluntarily comply, you want people to pay taxes, Because really, the tax is the major revenue to run the economy. So you cannot talk about economy and not talk about taxation. That's the fact. Governments run on taxes. Forget about the oil and the gold and the rest. Once oil goes and gold goes, the constant is tax. So that is the primary element to fund the economy. Why don't we educate our populace about it? That's number one. So we should do that. So, Mr. Ambassador, I'm sure you are listening to me. Okay. My second point, I've already talked about it, so I will not emphasize on it. The U.S. should come and sign double tax treaties with Africa. We want to do business with the U.S. We don't want AIDS anymore. So I'll move on to the next one. And this is the biggest challenge in Africa. Our laws are old because a lot of times they were inherited from the colonial masters. We haven't succeeded in revising those laws yet. That's one problem. Number two, the same law is unclear. Okay? The same laws, they do not capture today's transactions. They do not capture today's arrangements. They do not capture today's deals. Honestly, we must give this credit to the US. There are genuine US investors that want to go to Africa. But they get to Africa, they say, we want to engage. There is no terms of engagement. I can't go into specifics, but I have a list of areas, for example. We don't have in Africa, throughout Africa, because I'm currently working on a project that involves what I want to talk about. Cryptocurrency. Companies came to us in PwC. We want to do cryptocurrency in Africa. Can you find out for us the rules governing cryptocurrency? There was none. I'm not joking. I cannot disclose, but there was no country in Africa had it.
Yes, you're right.
Not even South Africa.
No
country in Africa has rules for cryptocurrency. Okay, let's say that one is too high. Let's move a little lower. Who was talking yesterday? I think it was the Colonel. He was talking about why some insurance companies in America, they are not doing business in Africa. Go through Africa. We do not have legislations, detailed legislations, clear legislations as to how an insurance business should be taxed.
Wow.
But we do insurance in Nigeria. We do insurance in Africa. But our laws are not clear. Some don't even have provisions at all. In Nigeria, we have like a paragraph in the law, but that's it. Okay, let's talk about technology. Okay, we don't have rules. It does not exist. I'm not talking about MTN. That's telecommunication. Leave those people. Obasanjo tried for Nigeria. Let's leave that. Technology, we don't have rules. So these guys want to do technology in Nigeria, but they don't know where to even start. And God help us, they go to Nigeria or they go to Ghana, and the person they meet there says, what is that? You say, what is Wi-Fi? Wow. And the person walks away. They don't even give you access to the educated people in the office to talk to. You just meet somebody in front. Okay, I came here to make inquiries about. Let's just use Wi-Fi, for example. And the person looks at you and says, "We don't do Wi-Fi here." and he walks away.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Okay, two more. Financial instruments. Derivatives. If you go to New York, that's what happens in New York. That's why New York is everywhere. They make money. We have a stock exchange. We have stock exchanges all across Africa, but we don't even know what financial derivatives are. Swaps. It's like options, like I'm talking above your head. We don't have rules.
Around that.
We don't have rules. So it's not every investor in the US that wants to put boots on the ground. Some of them have money and they believe that their money should work for them. It's not their fault.
Right.
Do you understand? It's not everybody that wants to come to Nigeria, come to Lagos. No, not everybody. Some people want to stay in the United States, in the comfort of their homes, and put their money to work for them. So they want to invest in stocks and exchanges, and they don't care if the returns is not as high as boots on ground. But that's their level of risk. We can't blame them. We should have regulations that cover such things.
Wow.
Yes, we don't have. Okay, the last one, e-commerce. Simple. Everybody knows e-commerce. You place an order in Amazon and it comes to your house. as simple as that is. We do it. People in Nigeria will do it. But do you know? We don't even know how we're going to tax. Okay, who do we tax? Is it the Amazon guy in Seattle, or is it the Nigerian customer that made the demand? We don't. So those are opportunities for the African governments.
I'm going to challenge you right here.
Yes, please.
Could you write a paper on everything you've shared here?
Yeah, without calling names.
Without calling names.
Yeah.
Because I think coming out of this, where are we putting all of this? Like, do we just walk away and go, we heard you? I think we need to leverage the platform. You're an expert. We have experts here. I want to challenge even our speakers to document, what you're seeing, what the challenges are. And we do now have access to the right people to table recommendations. And now we do have, there are a couple of things we'll be doing through the African Union. We can now even put it under the Continental Free Trade Agreement. Right? To say, we see what you're trying to do. It will make our job easier. We don't even have to talk about Nigeria. Let's leave it countrywide. Yeah. This will be a recommendation to the African Union, and we will attach it to the Continental Agreement, that as we're opening the market to build the One Africa market, and we want to break down cross-border restrictions, this is what you are going to encounter. These are the things we have to figure out. Have you factored this in to all of the work you're doing? If not, bring us to the table. So please. Awesome?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, let me chip in something quickly.
Yes.
So in across, and I'll try and make this really quick. Across Africa, there is a transitioning in disease burden. So previously in Africa, you will talk mainly about malaria, you will talk mainly about tuberculosis and other infectious diseases. But due to a couple of reasons, and I see this as an opportunity again for people that are interested in healthcare and want to invest in Africa. So there's a transitioning from non-communicable diseases, which is stuff like malaria, TB, and things like that, to non-communicable like hypertension. So there are more people are suffering from hypertension in Africa, like diabetes. More people are suffering from diabetes in Africa, and like cancers, more people are suffering from cancers in Africa. People adduce this. People say it's because of our change in diet, westernization of our diet. People say again it's because of rural to urban migration. Some people say it's because we're growing older and fertility is increasing and mortality is decreasing. But again, clearly there's a transitioning in disease pattern, and this is also an opportunity to be able to tackle these diseases, because most of these diseases are chronic diseases. Hypertension, diabetes, cancers, and things like that. They require drugs, they require various kinds of management, and it's an opportunity for people that want to invest in healthcare in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll leave you with the last word. You also have a list, but let's tie it up, then I'll make a comment.
Okay. Let me give you just a quick risk advice, free, and I'll put it in paper so that you can put it in paper. Okay. Here are the trending risks that anybody who is trying to do business in Africa needs to be aware of. First of all, number one, most Westerners who want to go to Africa underestimate the impact of culture. If you don't know the culture, you cannot play ball. So it's very important that you learn about the culture, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And one other thing that is closely associated with the culture is what we call in operational risk management, the human factor. It does not matter how many machines, how advanced your AI is, artificial intelligence is not going to replace people's brain. You still need human, at least now, to do the work. And the human that you employ can make or break your business. So you need to invest time either to train them and build some controls around that. Regulatory risks. There's more regulations that are coming on the book. If you're an American, you need to know about the factor and all of the other risks. We can help you just build a risk mapping so that you know what regulation you need to comply with. But in the spirit of the One Africa market, we need to be aware of money laundering activities. It's very important. Money laundering activity and financing of terrorism. You may not directly finance money laundering or finance terrorism, but if you don't do your homework very well and you partner with the wrong local person, you can get in trouble. That's all I can say there. There's one that a lot of people don't think about is the climate-related risk. Climate. Global warming is alive in Africa. If you take a look at the recent conflict that we have in the Sahel, they are mostly related to farmland, access to water, access to grazing land. So climate change or climate warming is directly or indirectly affecting conflict. This is something that we Africans need to be aware of. I already talked about the demographic divide, so I'm no longer going to talk about it. Africa has a younger population and older leadership. It's something that can create conflict at some point. Cybersecurity. That's the one before last. Cybersecurity. Most partners in Africa do not invest enough resources in cybersecurity. So guess what? If you're an American company based in the US or you're based on the continent in Lagos or in Abuja, and your system interfaces with your local partner system, if they don't have the correct firewalls, your system is vulnerable. So you need to be aware of it. And mobile money is very popular now in Africa. They do a lot of transactions with mobile money, fintech. But we do not have the proper level of security to ensure that all the transactions are secure and encrypted. So that's something we need to talk to the experts about. Last but not least, we're all talking about the free trade, free movement of goods. Unfortunately, in the last few years, we have noticed an increase of piracy activity in the Gulf of Guinea. There's more piracy activities in the Gulf of Guinea than anywhere else in the world over the last 2 years. I'm very happy to say that Nigeria has started to crack down on them. And when I checked last week, I think the numbers of successful piracy activities is decreasing, thanks to the military power of the Nigerian government, who is patrolling the Gulf of Guinea. It is very important that anybody who wants to do shipping, who wants to do business in Africa, be aware of all these risks. All in all, Africa is still and will remain for the next maybe 100 years a very attractive place.
Wow.
In closing, I have one client who invested in EcoBank, EDS, in one of the EcoBank products in Ghana. Last year, they made 38% return on their money. This year, so far, they have made 22%, and they are on track to beat last year. Africa is attractive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. I'll leave everybody with this thought. And it was an advice from one of my mentors based in Vietnam. She's in charge of everything that comes out of Vietnam and Cambodia for a big major corporation. And she said, Toyin, everything you're telling me about Africa sounds familiar. Because that was where we were about 15 to 20 years ago. But let me tell you something. Everything you're seeing is an opportunity. The opportunities I saw 15, 20 years ago, they don't exist anymore in Vietnam. The early movers that moved in, they built businesses during that time. And today, there's no more opportunity. They now claim the market. Said, go to Africa. All those things you're talking about, that you're saying there's no this, there's no that, there's no... He said they are all opportunities. That they are all opportunities. And he said, don't be like me. Because I saw those opportunities and I didn't, I saw it happen, but I did not participate at the potential that was possible. So that's what I'll leave you all with. All of the things we've talked about today, yes, there are challenges and all of that, but to be honest with you, there's no other place in the world that can use your talents and skills at the capacity and the level that Africa does need it. And Africa rewards those who invest in it. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.